to this Aim High Live. This is a science Aim High Live, and this one is called What is the Great Attractor and Other Mysterious Objects in Space. If this is your first time, then thanks so much for coming. You can ask questions whenever you want, and I will try to deal with them. Actually, this live is supported by Rochester Independent College, and so I've already had like a torrent of questions through, so I'll try and get to them as I go through. But in general, I'll just like do the story, and then we'll see what happens. Okay, so Izzy's here, Maddie is here. Right, I'm just gonna switch straight to here. Okay, so again, the freezer is here as well. Right, where I wanted to start with, so some of you will have seen some of this stuff before, but I kind of wanted to go back to some of it because it begins the story. So this is also something I've been reading a lot about recently. Firstly, does anyone know who this is? Who is this? Who do you think this is? Before we get started on what's the Great Attractor, who's this character? And once again, for those who are joining late, because I know that a lot of people will have just been logging in, this is an Aim High Live, so you can ask questions whenever you want. We are doing these kind of like open learning adventures through cool bits of science, so we're doing like geography, philosophy as well, and we're bringing on cool guests like we had Jane Goodall a couple of weeks ago, and we've got Josh Bombio coming up soon, and this is just me talking solo about what's the Great Attractor and other mysterious objects in space. Okay, so who's this? This is Florence Nightingale, yes. So quite a few of you already guessed this. 1 Million Sloths, Rebecca Carmen, Get Out of the Freezer are all saying this as well. Right, question. What kind of things do you associate with Florence Nightingale? Like, I want some words. Give me some words about the things that she has done. And if you're wondering what this has to do with space, and you're thinking this doesn't have anything to do with space, you are correct, because this does not have anything to do with space at the moment. But I'm going to get there. I just wanted to start on something that I've been reading about recently. Okay, so Maddie's saying hygiene. Xenon is saying hygiene. Get Out of the Freezer is talking about hospital sanitation. It's Jacob is saying hi. Hi. So there's a lot of stuff about people associating Florence Nightingale with hospital hygiene. If you are okay, so 1 million slots is saying she saved a lot of people in the war. If you're just joining, I'm asking what words do people associate with Florence Nightingale? And this is going to go into a story about space in a mo, but not yet. So people associate the Crimean War. She saved a lot of people in the war. Okay, so the things that I associate with Florence Nightingale, because of the things that I was taught at school, was that she was like a very caring nurse, and she has all these kind of qualities that are that historically have been kind of attributed to women in a way that is in my opinion quite kind of sexist. And I very recently found out, like just in the last couple of days, that actually Florence Nightingale was a really genius statistician, and she came up with this like whole new way of displaying data. So she's not only a great statistician, she's also a brilliant communicator, and she came up with this whole new way of displaying data to then lobby the government. So she was also brilliant at politics, so that she could lobby the government to completely transform hospitals during the war. So words that I think we should start associating with Florence Nightingale are mathematician, statistician, government lobby, like positive lobbyist, and all these kinds of things. Anyway, I just think there are a lot of things in the world where stories kind of persist and they might not necessarily be the right story. So, speaking of stories that seem a bit dodgy, this is called the Space Pen. Now, does anyone know what the story is of the Space Pen? What is what's strange about it? There's a story that often goes around about space pens and something to do with Russia and something to do with the USA. Does anyone know what it is? Get Out of the Freezer is saying, was Florence Nightingale the first person in space? And yeah, she probably was. She probably was. I mean, I was just saying she was good at stats, but you know, she's probably doing a lot of that as well, heading into space. Who knows what the story is of the Space Pen? Someone else, I'm £700 saying hello as well. Kieran on YouTube is saying the story is that NASA spent millions on developing a pen that works in space and the Russians just used a pencil. Exactly. So this is the story that has been going around for ages, is that the space pen was developed using millions of dollars in NASA and the Russians just used a pencil. But again, this is just a myth, and it's a myth that persists because people don't question the story. The reality is that neither NASA nor the Russians wanted to use pencils. Why? Why did they not want to use pencils? There is something particularly dangerous about using pencils in space. What do you guys think? Gather Freezer is saying pencils are boring, and that's plain wrong. Pencils are brilliant. The thing is, like, you go through school and you get your pen license, or like whatever it is when you're like finally allowed to use a pen, and it embeds this thing deep inside your consciousness of like pencils are bad, pens are better, and then eventually you kind of grow up a bit more and you start getting involved in a pencil again, and you're like, these are so much better. You can rub them out. You can even like write on your laptop and then rub it out. I've recently discovered. Anyway, I'm like, I just don't even understand why people aren't using pencils. They're just infinitely better than pens, except for in space, because has anyone said why? So 1 million sloths is saying, are they magnetic? And it's not that they're magnetic. Maddie's saying, is it lead radiation? And no, because the pencils won't actually contain lead. We just call it pencil lead, but actually it's pure graphite. And Xenon is saying, because the carbon could fly. Exactly. So the graphite in the pencil leads could, because you're in zero gravity or low gravity, the graphite can spread around the space station or the spaceship, and it can get inside machinery and it can disrupt electronics because, as you may or may not know, graphite can conduct electricity. So that's why it's really dangerous to have pencils in space, because you've basically got like a powder that's going to short circuit all of your electronics just floating around the space station. So the real story is that the space pen was developed by a big American company, which did spend a large amount of money developing it, but then the Russians and NASA both bought the pen. Imagine the ISS being blown up by an HP pencil. Well, the thing is, it's entirely possible. Right, okay, so I'm going to talk about one of my favourite objects in space now, which again is something that there have been kind of confusing stories about, but we'll just go and visit it. Oh, in fact, before I speak about it, let me just talk about this, because this is something else that's like quite a recent update that I was speaking to an astronomer friend about when we were talking about mysterious objects. And well, this isn't so much a mysterious object in space, but who knows what constellation this is, and even better, who knows what star this is in the top left? What do you guys reckon? What is this constellation and what is the star in the top left? And if you're joining late, then welcome. This is an Aim High Live. So this one is about physics, this one is about space, this one is about mysterious objects in space. And we've just been talking about some space-based myths, but now we're going to go into some of the cool things that are going on in space in the distance. I've got Damsel is saying that this is Orion, and that is spot on. Does anyone know what the name of this star is in the top left? I'm being asked what my star sign is. What is my star sign? Oh, Gemini. Which makes sense because I am a twin. But I have always found it really confusing that people believe in astrology as a thing. Although I guess it makes some sense that there must be some like seasonal effects of when you're born and light that you're exposed to in certain seasons. But I don't suppose it's got much to do with stars. Anyway, let's not get into that. So, yes, this is Orion. BH Swift has got that right as well. But does anyone know what the star is? Okay, I'll tell you what the star is, but also I'm quite dyslexic, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to spell this right, but I'll just try. I think it's spelt like that, something like that. Anyway, so Betelgeuse is how I pronounce this star. Right, Betelgeuse used to be one of the, I think maybe still is, but for a long time it's been one of the top 5 or so brightest stars in the sky. Now, extremely rapidly on the timescale of a star, something has happened to Betelgeuse. Does anyone know what's happened? And when I say extremely rapidly, I mean over the course of the most recent year, the most recent few months. What has happened to Betelgeuse? LDBR is saying I'm a bit late. Could you explain a bit? We are just talking about mysterious objects in space. So actually, it doesn't matter too much if you're a bit late to this one, because I thought that might happen on this one with people dropping in at different times. And so this one is like a series of different cool things in space. And so at the moment, we are talking about the constellation of Orion and what's going on with the star Betelgeuse. So this is the constellation that most people find easiest to locate in the night sky, because you've got the really clear belt across the hunter of Orion. Okay, so Izzy Rose is saying it's been dimming. So this star in the top left of Orion has decreased in brightness by something like 2/3. 2/3 less bright, and this has occurred over the course of just a few months. What does this mean? What does this mean is about to happen to that star, potentially? And when I say about to happen, this is on a time scale that we're talking about stars. So it could be in our lifetimes, but it also could be in the next 1,000 years or so. But still, it's relatively soon in terms of stellar lifetimes. So Get Out of the Freezer was saying, is it going to turn into a supernova? And I saw that someone else said that as well earlier on. So yes, we think that Betelgeuse is about supernova. Now, what this means is that it will explode in the night sky in such a way that it will be so bright that it will almost certainly be visible during the day. How do you think, does anyone think this is something that humans have ever observed? It will be like a huge patch of light in the night sky during the day that will just persist and then be even brighter during the night. Do you think we've ever seen this before as humans? And when I say seen this, I mean seen it with the naked eye. So has this been observed before in history with the naked eye? So a supernova that is sufficiently close and sufficiently bright that it lights up the night sky and the day sky. Okay, so a lot of people are saying, no, we don't think we've witnessed this before. Well, actually, 1 million sloths is saying, would it look like two suns? So it depends. It depends how close and how bright it is. But it's not impossible that these things can get bright enough to even cast shadows. And so Mixie1234 has come in saying Tycho Brahe observed one, right? Okay, so I don't know if it was Tycho Brahe, because I can't remember the names of the astronomers, but I know that there was a time in I think it was during Roman times, when the church wanted to get a group of learned people to investigate a mysterious light that had appeared in the sky that persisted for many months. And we don't know for sure, but the way that they described it sounds like a huge, very close by supernova that was so bright that it could be seen in the night sky, which I think is pretty cool. But otherwise, I think Betelgeuse will be the first one that we will see and properly understand what it is, and hopefully it'll happen in our lifetimes, because that would be pretty cool. Right, okay, now let's move on to the next cool mysterious object in space. This is one of my favourites, and this one is called Oumuamua. Oumuamua. Does anyone know what this object is? Now, I've made this quite small. I actually meant to make it quite a bit bigger, but I've failed. Anyway, so yeah, this object in space is something that was observed very recently. Get Out of the Freezer is saying it looks like a spaceship. Now, it's funny you should say that. BH Swift is saying it looks like a rock. And LDBR is saying it's a Hawaiian name, and I think it is a Hawaiian name, yeah. It's funny that you guys should say it looks like a spaceship, because this is something that a lot of people have been thinking about, and people have turned it into this picture here, which is a spaceship. So we don't know a huge amount about this object, but what we do know is it's the first proper interstellar object that we've ever observed in our solar system. And what that means is that it is an object that has travelled from another star system far away and has shot through our own solar system. Now, of course, there have probably been many of these before, but this is the first one that we have properly observed. Now, it's not big at all. How long do you guys reckon this might be? And how wide? What do you guys reckon the dimensions of this kind of thing might be? And you know, have a guess, because there's quite a big margin for error, because when we saw, the closest this ever got to us was something like 85 times further than the moon. So it's still quite far away and it's not very big. Oh, further than the moon. Okay, so we've got some guesses coming in with numbers. So this is about so one woman is last saying 100 meters. Damsel is saying 5 meters, around 50. Couple of kilometers. Okay, so these are all quite relatively close. So the estimates for how long it was were about 100 meters to 1,000 meters. And the estimates for how wide it was were about 35 to 165 meters, approximately. Now, you might be thinking, like, why is it that we can't seem to get a good measurement of this? But of course, you have to remember that it's so difficult to see these things in space when they're so far away and so small. And it's quite amazing in some ways that we managed to detect and understand it at all, when you find out that actually, when we saw this, no one ever took a photograph like this. This is an artist's impression, and this is obviously an artist's impression. But all we actually ever saw in the night sky was a glowing dot traveling very, very quickly, traveling along a path that things don't normally travel through in our solar system, because most things in our solar system sit relatively consistent with the solar plane. So all the planets are orbiting this way, and the comets and everything all orbit like this, and this was coming in more at that kind of angle, which is extremely unusual. So what we actually detected was a dot of light that, as it travelled through this very strange path, seemed to go between quite dim and quite bright, and quite dim and quite bright at regular intervals. So if you were to plot the brightness against time, so let's just call that B for brightness, which obviously is not the correct physics symbol, but whatever, we'll just do that for now. So if you were to plot the brightness against time, you would observe something a bit like this. Now, does anyone know why that might have occurred, and why we saw this signal, and why we then theorized that it was this shape? Have a think about why that might have been. And Chicken Boy is saying, how far is it from Earth? And we observed it. The closest it ever came to us was about 85 times further than the moon, but now it's far, far, far away from the Earth, because it's now travelled through our solar system and departed out the other side. And Fatima is saying, was I here last time we talked about it? And the answer, yes. Yeah, it sounds like you were. Okay, Maddie is saying, was it going fast and slowing down? So it wouldn't be doing that, because in space there's not much to slow anything down. That's the big problem with re-entry into the atmosphere, and why you see space shuttles almost like burning up as they enter and having to have all those heat-resistant pads underneath, is because it's really difficult to slow down enough to enter the atmosphere so that you're going slow enough to not have the air be rushing past you with so much friction that it burns you up. And in outer space, there's almost nothing to slow down something like Oumuamua. I mean, there's solar wind and things like that, but it's going to be negligible on the scale of this tiny object shooting through deep space. Okay, so some people have said, so LDBR has said spinning, Damsel has said turning and spinning, and Rebecca Carmen is saying it was rotating and reflecting light. Perfect, exactly. So mathematicians basically sat down with this information and they worked out the only possible shape that it could have is a shape like this, where it is turning and spinning. And so sometimes it's lengthways on, so we don't get much reflection. Sometimes it's sideways, and then we get loads of reflection, and so on. And it's kind of tumbling through space. So the idea that it's a spaceship full of aliens might be true, but it would be pretty weird if they were tumbling round and round and round, unless it's a spaceship that has not managed to complete its mission that it was trying to complete, and it maybe everything went wrong. 1 Million Sloths sings, what was the rock made of? And I don't know the answer to that, and I'm not sure if we found a way of figuring that out, because often when we're trying to figure out what something's made of, we use light shining through or past it so that we can see what frequencies that light has absorbed, because often that gives us an idea of what chemicals it might be made of. Other ways that we can guess what things are made of are looking at kind of gravitational effects, how things around it are attracted to it, because that gives us an idea of density. But I'm not sure if we were able to do that with this object, and I might be wrong, and maybe we did have more information about what it was made of, but I'm not sure. And Damsel is saying, wasn't it mostly ice? Again, check it out. I actually don't know. I don't know what Oumuamua was made of, but I encourage you to find out and read more. Okay, so next. Next, there are two ways that we could go. So we could go for the Great Attractor, or before we go for the Great Attractor, we could talk about scale and the size of things, and we could go on a journey that then leads us towards the Great Attractor. What do you guys want to do? So basically, vote either Great Attractor or Hyrax. Great Attractor or Hyrax, and decide which way we're going to go next. Go. Yeah, scale is the same as Hyrax if you already voted scale. I can see that a lot of people voted for that. Okay, loads of people are voting for scale. There's kind of one vote for Great Attractor. We'll still go to Great Attractor. I'm just deciding on the order that we're going to go through. Right. Okay. So first thing. This is a Hyrax, and a Hyrax is a cool animal that I'm really big fan of. Who's they live in South Africa. They're called dassies down there. Anyway. A Hyrax, what do you reckon is the closest genetic relative of a Hyrax? What's the closest genetic relative of a Hyrax? So which animal has the most genes in common with a Hyrax? Now, I'm just going to take a bite of this banana and also say, if you're joining late, thanks for coming. You're a bit late, but that's fine because we're actually just about to start a new bit. And this is an Aim High Live, so ask questions whenever you want. If you're watching on Facebook, you won't get to see what most people are saying, so do go onto the website, which is here, in order to get all the proper interaction. And yeah, just throw questions into the chat, and I'll see where they take me, and I'll take as many as I can. Okay, so. Gallo Freezer is saying a beaver, Zenon saying a weasel, otter, and then actually Lord of Beans is spot on. Yeah, closest living relative is an elephant. How tall is an elephant? Throw in some numbers. How tall do you reckon it is? Delete that. I'm not going to ask you how tall everything is actually, because it'll just take forever. 4 centimeters is incorrect. No. It's 4 meters tall, similar to a T-Rex when it was kind of bending over. Obviously, we now know that dinosaurs, a lot of dinosaurs were feathered, and that the feathers did not develop so that they could fly, but the feathers developed as a display for attracting mates. Now, we were even able to tell the color of feathers, and if you were on one of the previous lives, then you'll know some of the colors that dinosaurs could be. So does anyone know what color dinosaur was? What was one of the most kind of shocking discoveries of a color of dinosaur that we think was all this one color? And you will know if you're on a previous live with me. It had all feathers that were all ginger. Yeah, Damsel saying it. Yeah. So there was a dinosaur that we know was like absolutely covered in ginger feathers, which is pretty cool. Anyway, so yes, this is a 4 meter tall, 4 meter tall dinosaur. Now, if we shrink the dinosaur right down and the elephant right down, then we can compare it to this tree. What is this tree called? And also, while you're answering that, what is the biggest tree in the world? So what kind of tree is this, and what is the biggest tree in the world? What do you guys reckon? I shall wait for some answers to come in. And for those of you who are wondering what this has got to do with space, we will soon arrive at space. We're just going to scale up. And Izzy Rose is saying a redwood or sequoia, and Damsel is saying a red something. Yeah, so this is a giant redwood tree, and Izzy and LTBR are already referring to my favourite tree in the world, which I've talked about on like another couple of lives, but I'll just tell you again. So this tree here is the actual biggest tree in the world. This tree is called Pando, and this tree is, well, I'm saying this tree, it's all of this kind of light yellow area is all one single tree that sprouts up under the ground over and over and over again. And actually consists of 47,000 or so different individual trees, or what looks like different trees, and it's about 80,000 years old. Now, even if you were to add up all the wood in all of this one tree combined, so all of Pando combined, then it would still be only about 10% bigger or so than the biggest giant sequoia. So if you'd compare it to the single biggest giant sequoia, then the giant sequoia is still pretty close, which just gives you an idea of how enormous the giant sequoias are. Anyway, right, let's continue the scale up. So if we shrink down a giant redwood to that size, then we can compare it to this building, which is called the Burj Kalifa. Cool thing about the Burj Kalifa is that it's one of the few places in the world where you can see the sunset twice. Why do people think you can see the sunset twice from the Burj Kalifa? What do you guys reckon? That is a physics problem for you. Why can you see the sunset? How do you see the sunset twice from the Burj Khalifa? Okay, so shrinking down the Burj Khalifa, you can compare it to this. So here's the Burj Khalifa now, shrunk it down really small. You can compare it to this, which is, in fact, does anyone know what this is? Does anyone know what this is? So this is a depth that you might be familiar with, and then this is an object in space that I'm wondering if anyone knows might be similar to the size of of this. And while answers are coming in about that, I'll reply about the Burj Khalifa. So if you zoom up in the lift, Izzy Rose is saying you can see it twice. So yes, you can see the sunset from the bottom of the Burj Khalifa and then get in the lift, and the lift is sufficiently fast that it can take you to the top so that you can see the sun again above the horizon and watch it disappear again because it's such a tall building. So yes, this is the Mariana Trench, and it is similar in size to Phobos, which is the little moon that is so small that if you it's got such a small amount of gravity that you couldn't jump off yourself, but you could easily throw a tennis ball into orbit. Anyway, here's another quick physics problem for you that I'm not going to give you the exact answer for, but this is the kind of thing that I think would be quite fun to try and figure out yourself. So think about Monsters, Inc. If you were to open a door at the bottom of the Mariana Trench that was like a Monsters, Inc. door, except let's say it's about 4 times the size, and so it was essentially a portal that was draining the oceans, and it was just emptying the oceans into space. So emptying the oceans into outer space, so like a plug hole essentially, at the bottom of the deepest part of the ocean, which is the Mariana Trench, 11 kilometers deep. Then how long do you reckon it would take to drain the whole ocean through this plug hole that you've created? So Maddie is saying 47 days. Damsel is saying, is this a moon of some kind? And yes, this moon is called Phobos. Izzy Rose is saying ages, 1 million sloths thinks 1,000 hours. And Chicken Boy again is a lot more accurate. Yeah, this would take on the scale of tens of thousands of years to drain the entire ocean through that plug hole because the ocean is so big. Anyway, right, so scaling up, if we shrink down Phobos, then we come to this kind of scale, and it's starting to look pretty big, but actually we're still only at the scale of Italy. So this is Charon, the moon of Pluto, which has about the diameter of Italy itself. Right, carrying on scaling up, if we shrink down Italy and Charon, then we can compare it to this, which is of course the world, which is 12,700 kilometers. Now, if we shrink down the whole world, then we can compare it to this blue square. What do you guys think this blue square is the same size as? What do you think the blue square represents the size of? So Manny here is saying, is the blue the same size as our solar system? No, our solar system is a lot bigger than this. 1 million Celeste saying, is it Jupiter or Saturn? I think it's maybe a bit too small for those. No, Damsel Elysium knows. Yeah, this is the Minecraft world. So this is the procedurally generated Minecraft world is this big. So you should never try to explore all of Minecraft because it's just too big, and that would be a ridiculous feat to try and do. Or you could, and then you could call yourself a Minecraft explorer, but it's an almost impossible task. Right, if we shrink that down, then we get to this size. So if the Minecraft world is this size, then you compare it to our sun, and our sun is 1.4 million kilometers. Did you know, side fact, did you know that the center of the sun, if you take a lizard-sized piece of the center of the sun, then it will release heat slower than a lizard on Earth. Which is kind of bizarre because you think of the center of the sun as being very hot, but actually it takes energy a really, really huge amount of time to travel within the center of the sun. And so it's not that the center of the sun isn't really hot, it's just that the energy is not moving very quickly. The thermal energy is not transferring very much. And I'm not actually sure entirely why that is, but I imagine it's to do with a combination of temperature gradients and quantum electrodynamics, which is a really horrible theory that maybe one day you'll learn about if you carry on with physics. And when I say really horrible, it's also really beautiful, but it is just really hard to get your head around. Anyway, so let's now shrink down the sun and compare it to a proper star. So if we shrink down our sun, then this is Polaris. Who knows what Polaris is? Where do you normally find Polaris? What do you guys reckon? Whereabouts do you find Polaris? And this might not be so easy for people who live in... So I know that some people watching are in Australia and New Zealand. But where would you find Polaris if you are in the Northern Hemisphere? Yes, Izzy Rose is saying, isn't this the North Star? So this is the star that always... You may have seen some pictures, and I wish I had one now actually, of you may have seen some pictures of the night sky where someone's taken a long exposure photograph and all the stars form these circles, and try and find this if you haven't seen it before. All the stars form these big circles over this long exposure time period of many nights, except for Polaris, that stays in exactly the same spot in the north. So Polaris is the North Star, we always see it to the north. It's absolutely enormous compared to our star. Now, if we shrink down Polaris and make it really small, then we can compare it to this star, which is a real proper star, and this is a star called Canis Majoris. Now we're starting to get to the scale of like real stars, and you can see that our own sun would be like a pixel here compared to Canis Majoris, just giving you the idea of scale in the universe that we are heading towards as we head towards more mysterious objects in space. Right, so before we head towards these other mysterious objects, who knows what the meaning is of a light day? So this is Canis Majoris shrunk down. So what is a light day? It's several times bigger than Canis Majoris. It's about 9 times wider than Canis Majoris. And Izzy Rose is saying a big dog. Yeah, exactly. They called it the big dog because it's just such a big star. Get out of the freezer is saying 1/365th of a light year. Yes. Can anyone give me another explanation for what the meaning is of a light day? And Zenon is saying, what's the biggest star? The biggest star that I know of is Canis Majoris. But I'm sure that we've found bigger ones since, because people are constantly discovering new things. Has anyone got a definition of a light day? Okay, Rebecca Carmen's got a great one. How far light travels in the day? Zanon 2 and Damsel and Gala Freezer have all said great suggestions for how far it takes light to travel in a single day. Exactly. So that is going to help us to measure things, because now we're going to start to measure things in light days. Right, here is a cool mysterious object in space. This is called Gomez's hamburger. And Gomez's hamburger is a consequence of loads of dark, non-reflective matter sandwiched between lots of lighter, highly reflective matter. And this is 100 light days across, which is starting to become quite large. Now, if we compare this to, if we now shrink this down, then we can compare this to the Oort Cloud. What is the Oort Cloud? Does anybody know? Maddie Hayes saying, I hope it's a bean burger. Yeah, I'm getting really into my veggie burgers. I've been weaning myself towards the all of the new like homemade bean burgers. What's the one we had the other day? Chickpea burger was so good. Zenon is saying this is the cloud around the sun. Yes, so this is a cloud around the sun, and this is thought of as the limit of our sun's gravitational influence. So there is a huge cloud of dust and so on that surrounds our sun this ridiculous distance away, and if you're comprehending how small the sun must be now, the sun is now significantly smaller than a pixel in terms of our continuing to scale things up. Right. Okay, so next along the journey, if we shrink down the Oort Cloud, where did I put the Oort Cloud? Oort Cloud is now so small you can't even see it. Anyway, it was 2 light years across the Oort Cloud, and now we're up to 600 light years. This is to the Tarantula Nebula. If the Tarantula Nebula were as close as some of the stars in Orion, then this nebula itself would also cast visible shadows on Earth day and night. It would cast visible shadows on Earth day and night. It's so bright. So let's scale up further. In fact, before we continue scaling up, I had one thing to just go to, just because I wanted to play with poles. This is completely unrelated to space. We will go back to space in a moment. But can we just have a really quick aside? Really quick aside, everyone. Just to ask everyone to put your hand... Here, wait, let me switch out of here. Right, everyone, put your hand below your nose. And now just gently blow out of your nose. And you will feel that one of your nostrils is dominant over the other nostril. So for me, it's the left. Now, if people could figure out which nostril it is and put it into this poll. I'm keen to find out from the class around the world, like which nostril is dominant for everyone. So put it into the poll of the link that I've just sent you. This should bring in answers live. And Forever is saying it changes, doesn't it? And it's right, yeah. So the dominant nostril changes every. Yeah. Oh wait, I've sent the wrong poll. Sent the wrong one before. This is the right poll. No wonder no results coming up. There you go. Do that one instead. So, yeah, it changes, but we should have like a relatively even spread of people with their nostrils all around the world. Still not seeing any results coming on that poll, which is eerie. I'm wondering if I've sent the wrong one again. I'm going to come back to that in a mo when Pete... Mine was right on the left poll, but right... Anyway, this is the first time I've ever run one of these polls and seen literally 0 results come in. So I'm going to leave this poll now. Can't click the second link. Oh, I wonder why. Maybe it's because it needs HTTP. Here we go. Let's make this poll work. This poll should work. Click on this link and let's see what results people have in terms of their dominant nostril. Ooh, in order for the results to show up on my screen, people have to do the poll that I sent last. Otherwise, if you do the other one, then it's completely meaningless. Well, no one's doing the poll, so let's move on. Oh well. But if anyone can get on the second poll, then... Ah, finally I'm getting the results through. Here we go. Okay, cool. You were right there. I just had to reload my page. So what is your dominant nostril? We've got 54% on the right, 46% on the left. If you want to update that as your nostril changes, then let us know. Then just send in the results. But yeah, always interesting to know that one nostril dominates over the other, I think. Right, okay, back to mysterious objects in space. That was not necessarily an experiment that worked. But anyway, it was an experiment nonetheless. So, 600 light years away, you have the Tarantula Nebula, which can be so bright in outer space, which is so bright that if it were close enough, it would cast visible shadows on the Earth day and night. So if we compare the Tarantula Nebula by shrinking it down to this tiny size here to 14,000 light years, this is the Large Magellanic Cloud. Does anyone know what that is? So Zeno is saying it's a cloud, and that's correct. It is a cloud. Gather Freezer is saying, I don't know, but it sounds cool. And it is, so this is, nobody knows. So it seems quite weird that people don't know what this is, because this is one of our nearest neighbours. This is a small kind of dwarf galaxy that orbit around, or that, I'm not sure if they orbit actually, but they're certainly extremely close to the Milky Way. So this is a small galaxy that is very close to our own galaxy. Now, if we were to scale that down and compare that to our own galaxy is 120,000 light years across. Now, does anyone know what the centre of our galaxy smells like? What is the smell of the centre of our galaxy? What do you think? So Maddie is saying rum, and Gamma Freezer is also saying rum. This is great. Yes, Maddie and Gamma Freezer are spot on. It's not raw eggs. It's not root beer. It's often thrown around that it's the smell of raspberries, but actually it's just a small part of that smell, and it's much closer to the smell of rum. But when I say smell, obviously there are so few particles there that if you tried to breathe anything in, then actually it would just be sucking all the air out of your lungs, because you'd essentially be breathing straight into a vacuum. Anyway, so 120,000 light years across. If we now shrink that down to this tiny size and compare it to this galaxy, which is 5 million light years across, then this is a proper galaxy and makes our galaxy look absolutely tiny. And now, if we compare that 5 million light years and we shrink it down to 100th of the size and we compare it to this is called the Eridanus supervoid. So I know that this is supposed to be about mysterious objects in space, and this is not so much an object, but it's one of the coolest things that exists in deep space. Who knows what the Eridanus supervoid is, or who's ever heard of a supervoid? And can anyone Can anyone try to give us an idea of what that might be? What might be inside a supervoid? Chicken Boy saying, why does it have a smell? And this is going back to the center of the galaxy, and you're right that it's not so much that it has a smell in the sense that it would be an odor that we could detect very easily. It's more just that there are a lot of particles floating around that if they were on Earth, then we would be able to smell them. So particles that our noses are receptive to floating around the center of the galaxy. So Damsel is saying this has like no particles at all, right? Nothing. And Xenon is saying dark matter, and there are different ideas about what could possibly be there, but dark matter is not one of them. Dark energy is an idea that people think could be inside supervoids, but potentially. But not dark matter. Dark matter we think is really associated with areas that are actually full of matter, that has some kind of weird gravitational effect holding us all together, which I'll talk about in a moment. Right, okay, so the Eridanus supervoid is, I'm going to show you, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this before, but I want to show you a quick picture of what deep space looks like. So this here is a picture of space when you zoom out really, really far. So, you know, a lot of us think that that space is just kind of endless scattered galaxies and so on, but actually we've realized, or we've started to realize that it follows this kind of structure. So you get these clusters of thousands of galaxies, and these are called superclusters, and then you'll get some of them will be bigger, some of them will be smaller, and all of these galaxies lay themselves out in these kind of string shapes. So you have these kind of strings of galaxies interlinking one another together. And this is a lot to do with ideas that I'm not going to go into now about how we think dark matter might shape might create the shape of our universe by drawing things into gravitational strands. But the thing that I wanted to show you here is that as a consequence of this, you get these huge regions with absolutely nothing inside them at all. And these regions are called supervoids. And we don't know very much about them, but we just know that they are seemingly completely empty and that they're absolutely enormous. So this one, the Eridanus supervoid, is not even one of the biggest. And yet it would take 500 million years to travel across it, even if you could go at the speed of light, which we can't. So I know this isn't like a mysterious object in space, it's more like a lack of object, but for me, this is one of the coolest things that exists in space. Now, I realise actually that I've missed the Great Attractor in terms of scale, because let's go a little way back to the Great Attractor. So let's just get rid of this one. So the Great Attractor, let me move over here. Right, so here's a map of our local space, which is more zoomed in than this one. So more zoomed in than this one. And if you're wondering how we got this photograph, obviously we didn't take it as a photograph. It's a computer simulation, same as this one. Anyway, so this is a map of our local region of space. And here is the Milky Way. Oh, maybe I should do it with a red dot. So the Milky Way is around here. And then there are all these other things around, like the Virgo cluster is a cluster of galaxies. So a big cluster of galaxies that is one of our relatively close neighbours, and then you've got these other clusters like the Hydra cluster and the Antlia cluster. Now, so we know just by looking at the movement of other objects in space that there is some object over here called the Great Attractor. And this Great Attractor is drawing everything towards it. So things are either moving towards it or orbiting around it. And it's got this enormous gravitational pull, far, far, far greater than anything we've ever observed in terms of the black holes that we've observed and confirmed as being black holes. And it's crazy. It's like this unbelievable gravitational strength that we know hardly anything about. And the thing is that seems seems almost mischievously annoying about it, but makes it even more enticing to find out more about it, is that if you blow up the Milky Way, as in like you make it bigger, then if we are here, then the center of the Milky Way, which is the densest bit of stars and the hardest bit to look through, is here, and then the Great Attractor is through on the other side. So we really struggle to observe the Great Attractor as well, because it's completely on the opposite side of the center of our own galaxy. And so and we are orbiting around our galaxy at, I can't remember the exact rate, but it's like fractions of degrees every few like 1,000 years or so. And so I know that was an extremely vague way to make a measurement, but ultimately what I'm saying is that like even on the timescale remaining of the sun, we are barely going to move any of the distance further around the center of the galaxy. And so it may never be possible to see this thing with the current technology that we have. Gather the Freezer is saying, is the Andromeda Galaxy real, or is it just made up for TV shows? And I'm going to answer that in a moment. Well, I'm going to talk about the Andromeda Galaxy, and yes, it is real. And Reverse Ortega is saying, can a star turn into a planet? And no, I don't think there's any evidence of a star ever turning into a planet so far, but who knows if I don't know enough about what might happen to stars after they're kind of long dead, and they kind of, if you're because when stars are destroyed, they'll blow off a lot of their matter and create kind of interstellar dust, and some of that potentially could get involved in forming planets, but it's not like a normal process that happens in the universe, stars turning into planets. Right, I'll finish the bits that I'm going to do, and then let's go to open questions, because there are so many questions, and I've kind of been going through a lot of these things. So the next thing I wanted to do was shrink down the Eridanus supervoid into this tiny, tiny space here and compare it to this. So this is 12.7 billion light years, and this is the distance to something called the Hubble Deep Field. Now, who here has seen the Hubble Deep Field before? Who here has seen it before? Who here has never seen a picture of the Hubble Deep Field? And while I'm waiting to find out what this spread is, I'll tell you what it is. So the Hubble Deep Field is this amazing picture that is taken of a tiny slither of the night sky, and this little slither of the night sky is 1/24 millionth of the entire sphere that surrounds us. So it's a tiny, tiny, tiny piece of the night sky, and it was chosen because it appeared to have very little going on. So not a huge amount within this space, not too many stars or anything like that. And a group of scientists basically convinced the NASA and the Hubble Space Telescope team to allow them to take a long exposure photograph of this region of space. Now, it's quite difficult to get time on the Hubble Space Telescope because it's such an important tool for observing the universe around us. But they managed to get huge amounts of time to just repeatedly take photos of this same region over and over again over the course of many months. And they gradually built up a picture. And obviously this took a long time because these things are so far away and the light coming from them is such low intensity. But ultimately, they finally managed to create an image. And the image is one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen. And just to remind you of the distance away that it is before I show it to you, it's as I said, 12.7 billion light years away. And this is the picture that they came out with. Every single one of those things that you're seeing is its own galaxy. And some of them even kind of resemble our own galaxy in that they have these spiral-like shapes. And since the Hubble Deep Field, I believe there's been another image taken that goes even deeper in space and is even higher quality. But this is the first one of its kind, and this is why I find this one like really exciting. Because it just shows you how much is out there. This is 1/24 millionth of the night sky. And this is an area of the night sky that we thought did not necessarily seem that interesting. and yet it's oh, where did I put? Oh yeah, yeah. We didn't even think that it was that interesting, and yet we produced this picture. Okay, so the last thing on scale I was going to do is if you reduce the distance to the Hubble Deep Field down to this distance here, then you can compare it to this distance, which is 93 billion light years, which is the scale of the observable universe. So this is the amount of universe that is possible to see, because obviously, because once you get far enough away, objects are moving away from us so quickly that even the light that they're emitting is not fast enough to ever reach us. That's something I'll go into another time. I've done that on a previous live lesson about the expansion of the universe and what's beyond the universe, which is a strange question that doesn't quite make sense in itself. But anyway, that's a lesson for another time. So the observable universe is huge. Now, one of the questions that I like to ask about this is if you were to take a piece of paper, just a normal piece of A4 paper, then a piece of A4 paper is about 0.5 of a millimeter thick. Now, everybody knows that you can only fold paper so many times before it gets too thick and you can't fold it because it's too much effort to do so. But ultimately, every time you do fold a piece of paper, it doubles in thickness, right? So if you could carry on doubling the thickness of paper over and over again, how many folds in half would it take to create a thickness the size of the observable universe? So 93.4 billion light years. How many folds, how many doublings of the thickness of a piece of paper would that require? Gather Freezer is saying, what a smoots. Smoots is like a joke that I've only got 3 minutes left, so I'm realizing I'm running out of time. But a smoot is basically the height of this guy called Arthur Smoot or something like that, who was used to like measure out one of the bridges in Boston by some of the like computer nerds when they were setting up Google Maps, and he used to be able to do Google Maps in miles and kilometers and smoots. I think. I can't remember the exact story. Anyway, so Manny's saying 3,000 folds, Manny, and Warming Slash 11, Gather Freezer 7. You would only need to fold a piece of paper in half 103 times in order to generate the size of the observable universe. If you are practicing logarithms and stuff like that in maths, then I'd encourage you to have a go at doing that calculation, because it's pretty cool when you realize that you only need 103 doubles in order to create the thickness of the observable universe. It would only be something like 93 folds to get the distance away to the Great Attractor. Right, okay, finally, I just want to show you this little picture, which I think is quite cool, of the Andromeda Galaxy. So at the moment, the Andromeda Galaxy might look something like this in the night sky, and this is an artist's impression of what, if the Earth managed to survive this long, which I'm not sure it would, because I think the sun would swallow us up before this, but if it could, then this is what the night sky might look like as the Andromeda Galaxy gradually moves towards us, because it is moving towards us and ultimately collides with us. Now, my last question to you, while I wait for last questions to come in from you guys, is this. How many stars do you reckon would collide with one another if the Andromeda Galaxy collided with our galaxy? How many collisions would there be? And while you're letting me know what you think, I will just quickly show you what's coming up. So on Thursday, we've got a chance to meet George Monbiot, who is an amazing environmentalist who recently did that video with Greta Thunberg. I don't know if you've seen it yourself, but that's on Thursday at 4 p.m. So come along to that, because he is an amazing guy, and we're going to talk about his like near-death experiences when he crossed the Papua New Guinea jungle, when he got like cerebral malaria, and he is one of the most amazing speakers about things that need to change for the better in the world. So he's coming in on Thursday, so do come along to that. Here is what is coming up over the next few days. So, well, this afternoon, Hannah Bolland at Oxford is going to do Should You Donate Blood? Phil's going to do co-write a book. So if you want to become a published author, then sign up for Aim High, and you can become a published author with Phil, because we're actually going to publish this book. I'm going to do is My Green, Your Green, and and then on Monday I'm doing How Dangerous Are Fossils Really, and then obviously on Thursday we've got George Monbiot, and this is what's going on in the summer. So I'll actually distribute this via social media and the website, so you don't need to watch this yet. But just to flag that in the last 2 weeks of August, we're going to do a big catch up. So for anyone who's missed loads of school and is going into year 13 or year 12, or basically anyone who's between the ages of about like 14 and 17, we're going to help you catch up on stuff that you might have missed at school, because we know it's been a disruptive time. And yeah, if you wanna get involved with Aim High, then sign up for our schedule, which you can do via our website, and these are our social media links, so do follow those for updates. And thanks so much all for coming. Right, I will go to questions from people, but also tell you about how many collisions the Andromeda Galaxy would have with our own, and the answer is approximately 0, as Maddie said. Great answer. Okay, so let's go to questions. So there are quite a few questions that I had that came in before. I don't know how much time I have actually, because I need to go. I should have left more time for questions. But if anyone has any burning questions that they want to ask now, ask them now. Otherwise, in fact, probably best to come on to another Aim High Live, and I will deal with loads of the questions that came up here. In fact, I'll probably do that. If you watch the schedule, I will schedule a lesson for answering loads of the questions, especially the ones that came in from Rochester Independent College. And also thanks to Rochester for helping support this lesson. Yeah, so I guess that'll be coming up in the schedule. Right, thanks all for coming. Do come back for the next ones that I'm doing tomorrow on Is My Green Your Green, and the next day with George Monbiot, because those ones in particular are going to be great. All right, farewell all. Thanks for coming.